And the question is this: what are the best and worst real-world outcomes from Marx's economic analysis and theories? And what are the best and worst real-world outcomes from Vygotsky's analysis and theories? And lastly, can these questions be objectively answered, or is this simply just an opinion question? Andy, thanks. Looking forward to your response.
I think I can give an objective answer to this, Anthony, but it has to be an answer for our times. But I endeavour to be objective, so long as it's understood that I speak as a person of our times. Now, the first thing that has to be said is that no writer can be blamed for what is done with their work after they've died, unless you're a Hitler or somebody. But for anyone who makes a contribution to science, what happens to your work after you died, that's beyond your control. So that said, in relation to Marx, I wouldn't know where to begin or to end to talk about his best contribution, so I'll just let that slide. That's reflected in my work elsewhere. The interesting thing is, what are the worst outcomes? And all I can say is that Marx was a human being, a person of his times, in fact, I'd say a man of his times, and expressed the limitations of his times and the limitations of someone who was a revolutionary for his entire life. He was very imperious in his character, domineering, had a big romantic streak. But that aside, all I can say is that I wish he had made a more serious study of ethics, a critique perhaps of Hegel's ethics, because his lack of a serious attention to ethics has opened the door wide for a lot of unfortunate outcomes from his writings afterwards. And secondly, I wish that he had paid serious attention to writing down and elaborating his philosophical ideas, rather than leaving that job to Engels and just giving us examples of scientific work, as in Capital. He was inclined to give us philosophical views in a polemical context, which has not been helpful. But what can I say? He was a man of his times, he was a revolutionary, and he was involved in the struggle. In relation to Vygotsky, Vygotsky lived in very difficult times, wonderful creative times, but his creative lifetime was very short, and this places limitations on what he was able to elaborate and perfect, if you like. So we get a rather rough outcome from his work. I think that the worst outcome from Vygotsky's work is simply that his work has landed in such a different world from which it was written in, that people using his work in publishing have to spend far too much time explaining and justifying the philosophical basis of their work and demonstrating its relevance. Whereas if they were using more mainstream writers, they just get on with their research. And it is a fact that it is not only time spent in writing, but for a lot of people, it's a big struggle to come to grips with the foundations of Vygotsky's writing. And that's time well spent. And it's not Vygotsky's fault that we're not all raised from birth in his ideas. That's all I've got to say.